Oh, there we go.
Yay!
Hi, I'm Karen Kreska. I'm one of the associate pastors here at Trietsch, and I'm over music and worship. We're glad you're with us tonight.
Hey, I'm Clay. I'm one of the associate pastors in charge of mission and serving.
Hey, I'm Daniel. I'm the senior pastor here and having a good time with all of you.
Hi, I'm Jackie Watkins, and I'm your lay leader.
So tonight we're going to cover some questions that were submitted by members of our congregation, and we would welcome you commenting live. And if you have a question that you want to pose, we'll try to answer it this evening. If we don't get to your questions, if there are a lot that come in, then we'll be sure and cover that next week. So, all right, we're going to start with the
Yeah,
first
so
question.
let me get started here. So it comes, we'll start with reading the scripture, Matthew 1:18. This is how the birth of Jesus Christ took place. When Mary, his mother, was engaged to Joseph, before they were married, she became pregnant by the Holy Spirit. Joseph, her husband, was a righteous man. Because he did not want to humiliate her, he decided to call off their engagement quietly. As he was thinking about this, an angel from the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, don't be afraid to take Mary as your wife, because the child she carries was conceived by the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you will call him Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. Now all this took place so that what the Lord had spoken through the prophets would be fulfilled. Look, a virgin will come pregnant and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel. Emmanuel means God with us. When Joseph woke up, he did just as the angel from God commanded and took Mary as his wife. But he didn't have sexual relations with her until she gave birth to a son. Joseph called him Jesus.
Jesus.
So the question is, do you think that God coming down to earth to be fully human was his only way to save us? So, God's God.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And God could save us any way he wanted to.
Right.
So I don't think so. But it was a fulfillment of the prophecy, so it's clearly the plan that God had.
Yeah, I mean, I think God could have used anything God chose to do.
Right.
But it was sort of this fulfillment, and it worked out pretty good, I think.
I think it worked out.
We'll take it, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, so second question. Do you guys want to move on, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay. The second question gets a little deep, right? So what does it mean that Jesus is fully God and fully human? And how does that work? Well, I don't really know how it works, right? I mean, I think the point is that Jesus is both, fully human, fully God, 100% both, not partially both, but 100% both. And the way I look at it is Jesus is deity, God, so that we can be saved. That's what Jesus means, right? That God saves us. And then Jesus is fully human, so we can relate to it, right? So that he understands us, we understand him. He understands all of our problems, all of our woes, all of those kinds of things. And for me, that's good news. It's good news that he understands who we are, that he understands what problems, difficulties, issues we go through, and yet he's still God. And to my knowledge, it's the only world religion where the deity both comes down to be among the people, but is also one of the people. And I think that's pretty cool. I mean, I think that's kind of a neat deal.
Well, and he had to be fully human to be that sacrifice, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
To be totally relatable and to really be able to empathize and understand the plight of humanity and to care enough to intervene. Yeah, it's unique too.
I think it's cool that Jesus also had siblings, right? Because then he really knows how to relate, right? He really understands kind of the dilemmas we all go through. He understands relational issues. He understands discipline issues. He understands all kinds of stuff. And I know not everybody believes Jesus had siblings, but we do, right? We believe he had siblings. And so I think that's kind of cool.
He enters into real, genuine suffering, right? And then from his birth and having to flee to Egypt, I mean, life is hard, and life is hard for humans, and so Jesus fully enters into it, right? And he has all the struggles that we have, and that brings me hope, in a weird sort of way that God would choose the God who created it all and was so large that can imagine the world and it becomes, is the same God who comes down to earth to be with humanity and enter into all those pieces. So, fully human, and I think Jesus, shared meals together when he laughed until he cried, and then he had other meals where he was crying with people because he loved them and he cared for them. And,
well, I think even though we don't have the one story of when he's a teenager, right, when he's in the temple, I think it also gives hope to parents about how they parent, how they relate, how they interact. We had a little bit of that question last week. But I just think it offers you the blessing to know that this God also knows all of your issues and knows how to understand who you are. And I think the biggest difficulty is the 100% both ways, right? It doesn't add up mathematically, right? How can somebody be both 100% God and 100% human? That's the hardest part. I wish I could describe that better, but I don't have a better way to do that.
Well, and Justin just asked a question about that, but I'm not sure I 100% understand the question, Justin, if you can clarify. But he asked, are there any biblical examples of someone who is not fully God and fully human, and who isn't fully God or fully human? And then he kind of explains, are there any examples of someone who is partially God and partially human?
I don't know about partially God and partially human, but of course there's descriptions of angels, which are messengers of God. There's descriptions in the Old Testament about the heavenly court. There are questions about, for instance, in Genesis chapter 1, right, about this plural language, let us make humankind in our own image. And some people think that that's kind of the heavenly court. God's kind of talking to friends of his, if you will. And so I don't know that you could call that partial, right?
I don't know that I would call that God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Messenger of God. Yeah.
I hope that answers your question, Justin.
And we've had another question from David asking, did Jesus ever worry?
Oh, my gut tells me no, but who knows?
I think on the cross
I
he
think
worried.
he did. Yeah.
I think he was worried that God had forsaken him, and
Isn't that interesting? Because when I read that and I see Psalm 22, that's what he's quoting, right?
Yeah.
Psalm 22.
Yes.
That's a lament psalm, but
Right.
the lament psalms have this powerful imagery in them that also acknowledge hope and kind of the richness
I think
of God.
more about before that when he was praying in the garden. He said, my God, please, do I have to
Take
do
this
this?
from
Take
me.
this cup
Right.
from me.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that would be a worry. But I know the pain I'm about to have.
right.
Take it from me. And
I think fully human, you would worry.
Well,
Stay
we're
awake
made
with
in-
me.
we're
I'm
made
worried
in
you're
the
not gonna be able to cut it when I'm gone.
Well,
See, I see that as concern, not worry. Maybe that's just a
Semantics.
but to me, concern is different from worry.
He said.
Concern means
Because he knew what was going to happen.
I take note. I recognize this is a problem. I am concerned. Versus worry, which goes, I'm not sure how this is going to come out, and I'm not sure I trust that this is going to come out right. Because I think worry, to me, worry is one step further down the road, right? I don't know. That's where I look at it.
So where do we get our worry from? Because we're made in the likeness of God.
Yeah, I think worry. This is just me talking, right? But I think worry is our human frailty and our human, the human condition. It's the sinful nature of who we are.
Okay.
Worry is natural, right? I mean, I worry. I assume we all worry.
Sure.
But I think that's a part of our human condition, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a part of the original design or desire of God. Is that we
Well, that would make
worry.
sense. Yeah, because he created this perfect world for us to live in. We would have no worries, right?
Yeah.
Had we.
True.
And we've got a question from Laura, a fun question. She's watching with her daughter, and her daughter wants to know, what day of the week was Jesus born?
Well, we talked about this a little last week, right, about how December 25th was chosen, and we recognized that there was there were some holidays that kind of, spoke to it, but I don't, unless you guys know different, I can't identify a day of the week. Sorry.
We'll go with Sunday.
We'll say
And we have another question.
Born and raised, right? Born and raised.
We have another question that's come in from Doug. You might be able to guess who that is.
I like these questions. I don't know if I want to answer one for
I
Doug.
know, Doug.
Be nice.
He
Doug.
wants to know, did Jesus know what a mess the world would be?
Wow. Did Jesus know what a mess the world would be?
Okay, so I'm the non-pastor on board here. Of course he did, right? Of course he did. That's why he did what he did.
So I wonder if the question is, so when he was born, did he know that, or as he became an adult, as he grew up, did he know that?
You mean as a teenager walking around, did he know?
Yeah.
I mean, I always wonder at what point did he really realize what his
Who he was.
Yeah, what
Right.
his place in life was too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good point.
That'd be interesting.
We go with yes.
Clay, move us on.
Yeah,
man.
right. So the next question: do we know anything more about Joseph from from sources other than the Bible? Why don't we know much about him? And this was an interesting question.
Wasn't it?
And so, church history. We don't. Not aware of great sources that we would say this is absolutely certain. And it's certainly not in our Bible, but church history and tradition teaches that Joseph was more likely an older man, and there's a good chance that he passed away at some point in Jesus' childhood. If you remember when Jesus is on the cross, Mary is there, but Joseph isn't, and we don't really hear much about Joseph in the Gospels, and so that kind of leads us to this place of maybe Joseph passed away, which also I think goes back to what we talked about, Jesus being fully human. Like, Jesus had to bury his father. And
Wow.
50% of the kids in America right now will live in a single parent household for a significant amount of time. It's like, how relatable is that? Jesus was in a single parent household for a portion of time. And
As the eldest son.
as the eldest son, right? Yeah. I mean, Jesus didn't only enter into humanity, but he had to miss his father and weep
And then thus care for the family.
Right.
Right? Because the tradition would be that he would be the one that would go on
Right.
and care
Yeah.
for his family. And I mean, we also hear that he, was a carpenter, as Joseph was, right? And that's how he more than likely cared for the family until he went into his ministry.
Right. This was fascinating as we, kind of dug into the question, because I was reminded as I was going back to Matthew 1 and Luke 1 and 2 that we never hear Joseph speak. There's no language or dialogue from him. We know of him. We know what he does.
Right.
But you never heard or knew of anything that he shared or spoke, right? I mean, we even had stuff from Elizabeth, and we had stuff from, Simeon, but we don't have stuff from Joseph, which is fascinating. We don't know much about the guy.
So what do we think that means in relationship to our salvation?
Wow, there's a deep question.
Sorry.
I think it means Joseph was an important role, but not a vital role,
Right.
He's important to the process.
Which
but not
might be
vital.
where you were going to go, Clay. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I just, it's Jesus living into humanity, and we know that Jesus was deeply concerned for widows, right, and for people. Jesus knew, right, at some point, Jesus realizes that, his end is coming.
Yeah.
And so he knows that he's going to leave his mom, who's a widow, but he's been able to be there for her, and now all of a sudden, he's gone as well. And so he cares for his mom, who's gone. So yeah, I wish we knew more about Joseph. I'd be really interested to see who he was.
We have a question from Chris asking, did Jesus go through the process of sanctification?
Oh, wow.
Man, people are getting deep on us.
Yeah.
What is this? What is this all about? Did he go through the process of sanctification? Well, I would, so we're all just talking, right?
Right,
We
sure.
hands in the house.
Right.
I think if he was human, he had to have, right? He had to have been processed out, if you will. He had to have been sort of working toward that. I think the weirdness about Jesus is, again, this 100% divine, 100% human. So
without that sin, though, right?
Right, it would have already been sanctified.
Right. Yeah.
Justified and sanctified. Filled with the Holy
glorified,
Ghost.
vidified, willified.
Did you all decide? Yes or no?
Well, we were waiting for you to tell us.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think
I didn't go to school for that.
I think he already was when he.
I think
was
Karen
on
needs
the
to move to the
scene.
next question.
Okay,
We
I
hope
think
that
he already
Chris
was.
feels
That's just my
satisfied by that
opinion.
question.
All right.
Well, we have another question that's come. We're there wrapping up
keep
questions.
on. Come on, y'all.
Yeah, we got a question from Dee Dee asking, talking about the humanity of Jesus. Did he really feel all the temptations we do, and how did he deal with it?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because when you were talking about that earlier, when we were sort of talking about this earlier, I thought to myself, the thing that I think is interesting is that so many times we say, well, Jesus was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
so he didn't fall into those temptations because he
Right.
was perfect.
Right.
And so that kind of gives us an out, right?
Mhm.
Right, but he did go through the temptations,
did,
right?
yes.
We have
Yeah,
the temptation
sure,
stories in
yes.
Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and you know, he's tempted with power, he's tempted with authority, he's
Yes.
tempted to with power in terms of turning stuff into bread and all that kind of stuff. And you know, his response is I saw as twofold. One was to quote scripture,
Right.
and one was to rely on God, right? To just rely on what it was God provided for him. And I think that's our
Model.
foundation,
Yes.
right? That's the
Yes.
model.
That's
Yeah,
the
I would agree.
Yeah.
We have more questions. Question from Julie asking, a teenager wants to know, why do we only talk about the birth of Jesus in December? And we talk about him dying on the cross throughout the year, but we don't talk about his birth throughout the year.
Oh, wow, I love that question.
Yeah, that's a great
That's a
question.
great question.
What do you think, Clay?
So I think we miss out as the church.
Yeah.
I think we need to be talking about Emmanuel, God with us.
Mhm.
And I would hope that we might not be talking about little baby Jesus throughout the year, but I would hope that we live into the God with us on a regular basis.
The incarnation.
The incarnation of God. So if we're only talking about the cross, we're missing a huge element. It drives me crazy too if we, even on Christmas sometimes there's, not here, but I've been places where it's like, birth of
We go to
Jesus,
the cross.
now we gotta go to the cross,
Yeah.
like right away, and we're like,
Yeah,
whoa,
wait.
Jesus was just born, and we're trying to kill him already, and I don't know, I think we need to do a better job sitting with the baby
Yeah.
Jesus and sitting with God with us and going through his ministry.
Great reminder.
I think whoever that was, it gives us a great reminder.
Great reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And David has a question. If Joseph died so early, how was Mary supported?
Well,
We
there's a
don't-
great
We
question.
don't know that.
We
It's
don't know for
speculation
sure.
Yeah,
that
it's
he died
speculation.
early.
Yeah.
That's not a definitive. The Bible doesn't say he died at this point, but it's believed that he did. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's just based on circumstantial
Sure,
evidence, right?
sure.
All the stuff you identified. So we don't know that he
We
died
don't
early,
know.
but he wasn't there. That's what we
Well,
know. He wasn't at the cross.
and if that were the case, then definitely the eldest son or
Mhm.
family members would have stepped in. So,
Right. Right.
you
She
know, it
could
is
have had a good
believed.
support system.
Yeah, it was believed that Jesus was a carpenter as well. So, he was a carpenter. He was earning the
Had
income.
skills.
Yeah, and so the other point of that is, as you rightfully pointed out, you know, so Jesus, as the oldest son, probably had some sense of taking care of her. And then on the cross, he says, "So John, here's your
Here's
mom.
your mom."
I'm handing
Yeah.
her over to you so
Mhm.
that you can take care of her."
So that makes me feel like
Yeah.
that he did take care of her until the end.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, the next
Next one.
question. How can we find the comfort and joy of the season when our anticipation has come to great disappointment or the grief of the loss of someone or something dear to us? So this question, you know, at first kind of pass, I would just say there's a lot of cliche kind of answers that God is with us in our suffering, which is the truth. But we can't minimize when we've had disappointment or loss. We had a huge loss in our church family this week, just a devastating loss of a 53-year-old mom, very sudden, and it really rocks you to your core of,
Mhm.
okay, God, here we are in this beautiful, joyful season with so much excitement and energy, and then you gotta, you know, hit the brakes and think, okay, where are you? How can this be? But we know, just in Psalm 23, that we walk through valleys. We don't stay in valleys, we walk through valleys, and God is with us. And that's our hope, and that's our peace and our comfort. But to the family, to the person that's really in deep sorrow and grief, we know that Jesus experienced grief, and Jesus experienced sorrow and is with us. And time and prayer and community and faith can sustain us. It doesn't eradicate, but it's a season. And so we can find our hope and our peace just knowing that God empathizes and is with us in our pain.
It's one of the reasons I love that we offer Stephen Ministers, right? Because grief is hard. Grief is normal, and it's difficult to process. And I love that we have Stephen Ministers who can help folks walk one-on-one through that grief, however it takes shape, right? Whether it's a loss of a loved one through death, or even a divorce, or loss of a job, or any of those things. And I think that's true. And I think, as you rightfully point out, time offers this healing. And I think in that time frame, it's also important to give yourself permission
Right.
to enjoy.
Yes.
you at some point, because often a part of grief is, well, I can't enjoy that, and I can't be happy, and I can't.
Guilt.
Right. And so I think it's important to step off that bridge, if you will, or whatever you want to call it. Say, I've got to give myself permission at some point to say it's all right to enjoy even just this moment. Doesn't have to be the whole time, but just even that moment.
And even to give yourself permission to be sad or to be angry.
Absolutely.
If you've experienced a loss, and to think, but I should be happy, but I should be joyful, but I should be grateful. How you feel is how you feel, and God knows that. And so not to make excuses, but to be fully present in your grief or your pain or whatever, and not have an expected, I should be over this by now. Or
It's hard to move through this kind of season when you're in grief. It really is. Absolutely.
So the next question is, what are the ways we can make room not just for ourselves, but for the community? And I think we do that when we start thinking about other people. And I watched a family of, it was the highlight of my day today, I watched a family of with 4 kids walk in, and they all had presents. And each of the kids joyfully put the present down at the tree and made it look great. I mean, they were all ecstatic to be giving, right? And I know each of those kids would have loved to open that present and play with it, but what they were doing was making room for somebody else. And that, kudos to the parents for helping them and walking them through that. But we all need to do that, whether we are a 2-year-old or whether we're 82. We need to create some space where we're serving, where we're giving. I think, Daniel, you challenged us to meet new people today. And I think part of that, making room for other people, is connecting with people we don't think like, look like, talk like, and getting to know them. And then we realize, oh yeah, this birth is for everybody. Yeah.
I love that one of our Sunday school classes, at least one, there may be others, but I know of one of our Sunday school classes that makes it a priority every single year to sign up to ring the bell for Salvation Army. And so many of them have been posting throughout the season about their time. It's fun to just watch them interface with people and recognize that they're giving themselves to other folks. I think that's cool.
We've got a question from David. If Emmanuel means God with us, then who is Emmanuel today? Is it us? Is it the church?
Well, I certainly think that's one of the responses, right? I mean, God with us is Jesus, and Jesus is with us, I believe, in very tangible ways. But some of those tangible ways are in and through people, right? In and through the actions, behaviors of the church and people of faith, and absolutely. I also believe
the Holy Spirit runs through.
Absolutely.
There you go. Yeah.
And then Julie has another question from the kids in the Anchor,
Cool.
who would like to know, how old were the wise men?
Well, if they were wise, they
They
must
had
have
to
been
be
old.
really old.
Probably 50.
Tell Julie,
We don't
we're not
know.
sure.
We're not sure.
I think Clay's pretty wise, and he's the youngest one around here, right? So, who
And
knows how old they are?
Yeah, we don't
Speculation.
know. We don't know.
Yeah.
And we've got another question from Justin. Did Jesus come into the world with a message to share, or did he develop his message over time as a response to the world around him?
That's a great question.
I think it's yes.
Yes.
Yeah, both.
I think
It's
the answer
both.
is yes.
Both, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But how beautiful that is that to think about, though, that it's not all prefabricated, right?
Right.
Like it wasn't.
Wasn't a script.
Here's my message, and this I'm gonna.
Yep.
It's I've got I'm walking through this crowd, and who touched me?
Right,
Like,
right.
Because
I
he
mean,
had free will too.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I
How
think
wild
it-
is
Well,
that?
yeah, and in
Changes
scripture when he
that.
talks about how he saw that there was a need, so that means he had his eyes open to
Right.
it.
Right.
Yeah.
You see the crowd, and he had compassion on them, right?
Yes.
He saw the crowd as well in another story and got kind of frustrated with them, right? You're like, that's my man.
Yeah.
That's the one you relate to. Okay.
Believe it. And
No, I
it's-
mean both. I just mean that.
We're not going to chime in.
So next question. The Christmas season always gives me such anxiety, expectations, events, hustle, bustle. What daily strategies can help me keep focus? By golly, we all need that, right? I mean, this time just, man, it just kind of overwhelmed. So I don't know that I'm going to offer anything new. We've talked about this over the last couple of weeks in worship, but just things like prayer, solitude even, giving yourself permission to go be by yourself, to
Yes.
spend time with God by yourself. The other thing I kind of wrote down was don't force shopping. And because I do think we all feel obligated. I've got to go do this. I've got to get this done. Even Clay and I are online shoppers, and you guys may be in the stores, but even the online stuff, you sometimes feel obligated to go do it. And so I say to myself sometimes, just wait. It's all right if you wait. Now, part of what helps is it's next day shipping, but
Yes.
but just wait. Just wait. It's all
And
right.
if you
I
put it
just
in your
finished mine
basket,
yesterday.
if you just put it in your basket, generally you'll get a discount the next day.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Helpful
Well, hey, there you go. Yeah,
Helpful
yeah.
hints from Jackie.
That's
All right, next question. Are we good with that?
No,
Yeah.
there's a prayer offered on Thursdays at the church from 11:45
Oh,
to
yes.
12:45, and it's a contemplative prayer group. And I needed that so much
Yeah.
this week, to gather with a group of people and to just spend time quietly praying, journaling, and it was beautiful. But I even had to rush to get here, and so it would have been really easy to just say, well, I'm too busy, and I've got other work I need to do. And so I think the challenge for all of us is find those spots to say, okay, I'm busy, and I've got a whole lot to do, but this is God time.
Absolutely.
Well, and some of that is the planning that we talked about several months ago in some meetings that we were having is setting aside, and this is from Carrie, set aside time in your schedule, plan those 15-minute or 30 minutes where you can literally just hear yourself think and hear from God.
Correct. Yeah. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't identify the Anchor's, Advent calendar and their blessing bag, and then the Advent devotional that we put out as well. So use your TMUMC app, and you can have a daily devotion that kind of guides you through stuff as well.
Sure.
Good stuff.
I don't think I shared my experience. I don't think I shared that here. But we did the Anchor blessing bag, and in it
At your house.
At my house with my 5 and 6 year old, and it has you have silent prayer for a minute. So we pray, and the kids are used to praying out loud. We don't do a lot of silent prayer, and so I'm just thinking, all right, what's going to happen? Like, is my patience going to run out after about 15 seconds because the kids won't sit still? And they sat beautifully still for a whole minute.
Cool.
And then afterwards, there's it's kind of chapstick, but the kids offer blessings to each other, and I acted like I didn't know what to do with it. And said, well, what do we do with this? And my daughter goes, oh, we offer blessings. I'll do it. And then she offered a unique blessing to each of us. So she drew a little cross on each of us, and it was holy. And yeah, so if you're a parent or a grandparent, if you got that opportunity, create that space,
That's right.
because it was holy.
Don't underestimate the power of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, if you could change the way Christians celebrate Christmas, what would you change and why? I think my first response to that question would be the commercialism, obviously, and the fact that the expectation, I know for my kids and by myself as well, we think about the things we're going to receive, and I think I would start the tradition of you get one gift but you give two, so that we always put in front of us that the tradition should be you give twice as much as you get.
Like that.
You know what I'd love? I'd love to reinstitute, and I know some Orthodox traditions do this, but I'd love to reissue the 12 days of Christmas, from Christmas Day to January 6th, right? To make ready, that's also downtime for us now, usually, just before we go back to school or whatever, or in some cases go back to work. That time we've rushed to December 25th and we've kind of gotten everything done, but what would it be like if we actually celebrated those 12 days and welcomed the wise men or whatever, the magi, and spent time almost like Hanukkah, right? So Hanukkah gives you 8 days, and we've got 12 days, and just take those days one day at a time and see what it would look like. I think that'd be fun.
I'd get rid of all the presents. I really wish we could do that. And like Thanksgiving, we had such a blast with kids and cousins, and just because there wasn't a single present to distract them. So we just played and we ate. And I know from past Christmases, and because I was one of those kids too, when are we doing presents? And it almost dominates the whole night.
Almost.
It dominates the whole night. So I lament the fact that I mean, we're so blessed that we have opportunities to give and receive presents, but yeah, sometimes it feels skewed.
Right.
But I agree, that's what I would, Thanksgiving's my favorite holiday for that reason. Because you don't have to do presents or receive presents. I mean, I like to get presents, but it's also stressful to get presents, you know?
Right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I just like the simplicity of it. I think that the giving rather than receiving, I get so much joy out of giving. So for me, that it would be about that for sure. And this year I've tried to get, I hope my kids aren't listening, although maybe I know they are. I've tried to get everybody something that gives, that organization gives to something else. So either like Tom's shoes or like something like that.
Right.
So that at least I feel like I'm
doing both.
Yeah, and at checkout, no matter where I'm at, whether I'm at the pet store or wherever, if there's a donation button, I've been hitting the donation button too, just as a reminder that this is a season of giving.
Right.
And because these are organizations I probably never would give my money to on a regular basis.
Sure.
So,
So that's a perfect segue into our next question from Laura. She asks, we do our own charity giving on Christmas that's not part of the church. How do we balance? Is that considered a tithe?
Oh, well, going to get into
Above and
tithe.
beyond.
Yeah. So tithe belongs to God, and so what we call other offering belongs anywhere. Might belong to God, but it might belong to either nonprofits or other service organizations. So, biblically the tithe says bring it to God, have that for God. That's 10%, and then any other offerings, which is all kinds, can go anywhere. Right? Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Good question, Laura. Thank you.
okay.
I think so.
She'll let me know if it didn't, I'm
That's
sure.
right. So next question is, why are the accounts of Jesus' birth different in Luke and Matthew, and why aren't they in Mark and John? And that's a great question. And so short answer is different authors, different audiences, right? So Matthew and Luke are two different guys, two different audiences. Matthew's writing primarily to Jewish folks who want to understand who this guy Jesus is and what he's all about. And so Matthew's going to spend a lot of time, focused on the lineage of Jesus and how he fulfills the Jewish prophecy, right? Luke, on the other hand, is just going to kind of try to help us understand why Jesus came. He came to save us from our sins. He came to help alleviate suffering. He came to help reach the least and the last and the lost. And so that's why they tell the story, and that's why they tell it differently, right? Now, Mark and John, two different complete stories, right? John is not so much. John's the last gospel, right? He's sort of the last one written, and so church is already sort of developed, if you will, and so there's not a need to tell that story. But John does a fabulous job, I think, of sort of connecting Jesus back to creation, connecting Jesus to help make what I just referred to as the Trinity connection. John does this great job of sort of saying, man, Jesus was there from the very beginning, and the Holy Spirit was there from the very beginning, and so you get that mystical stuff right in John chapter 1. Mark, on the other hand, he's just short. Mark's writing he's just going to get things, he's succinct and straight to the point. I love that in Mark chapter 1, the very first chapter, we have the temptation and we have the kingdom has come. Get ready, because we're going to shake this town up, right? I love Mark's gospel. And so he just doesn't have the same force, if you will, of the birth. And so anyway, other thoughts, y'all?
I think to your point, that the different gospel writers had different audiences, but also they write in different styles and emphasizing what they think are the most important things. And there's brevity in the Gospel of Mark, and just different styles. And if we were all telling the same story to an audience of, hey, you need to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, He's Messiah, He's here, we would probably highlight different parts of the story too, and so we would tell it very differently.
Yeah. Well, even a simple thing is thinking about the start of this church, right? And if you were to get with the people that were kind of there at the beginning and hear their story, some would say, oh, this is where we first met, and other people would have, and it's all true, but different people remember and want to tell different things. So I think when we look at, and that happens, I think, not just for the birth narrative, but all throughout the Gospels. When we look at it, we go, oh, okay, well, that was for this audience, and that's what this author wanted to emphasize. So
I love both aspects of the Gospels where you have those overlaps and they say the same thing, and then you have those very unique, distinctive stories in each one. And both of those concepts, I think, give richness to the text and to the story.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Ready for the next question?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so the next question is, how do you think the story of Jesus' birth would be different if it had been written by Mary or by Joseph? So, gosh, I wish we had that.
Wouldn't that be
Don't
awesome?
you? Wouldn't you love
Yeah.
that?
It would.
To have this
Absolutely.
young girl's story of, I woke up in the middle of the night and there was
Right,
things
right.
here and it's telling me this, and I'm
Right.
like, I don't even know what that means,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but then her bravery and just going through all of it and her thought process and her fear and to hear all of those things, because we get the story of this brave young girl, right? But she had to be petrified.
Absolutely.
She could have been stoned to death, right? She could have, so many things could have happened, but instead, and then that feeling of, wow, I'm the mother of Jesus. Wow, I can't even imagine. So I love that story. And to everybody's point, there's not a lot about Joseph. So to hear
Right.
Joseph's story about it, who really was a gracious man. Think of those times he had rights. He could have done so many things differently, and he chose the faithful life.
Yeah.
And then to say, I'm going to take this child and raise this child as my own. I'm going to teach him all that I know, and to have that written down and to hear it would be absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, I wish that we had an
Yeah.
account of Mary, which we had a woman's perspective. Just saying. We have Magnificat, but beyond that, I think when Jesus returns, it's going to be different. It's going to be different. There's
There
going to
you
be
go.
more women who have a strong voice
Look out.
and a presence.
And just think about all, they were struggling, right? To get to Bethlehem, and parents, like if they're about to have a kid, parents are, and Mama Bear's going to come out here. So I wonder, like, what is she feeling in the midst of, like, I have to protect, I've got to provide, I've got to find a safe spot. Just that whole wrestling that she has to deal with.
Right. And anything first person is more intense.
Yeah.
If you're sharing your story than someone else telling your story.
Well, and I wonder if because she was carrying Jesus, that there was a piece about her that God just gave along with that, that was beyond our understanding as well.
Sure.
I mean, there's so many things.
Absolutely.
We could create a great story, couldn't we?
Right.
Yeah.
And I make up that you'd have more detail about the birth itself. I make up that you'd have more emotion of the telling of that you'd have more sort of, not that it's not spiritual, because it's deeply spiritual, but I think you'd have a deeper spirituality about the birth itself versus sort of what I refer to as sort of the external components of the shepherds and the angels singing and the animals out. I think it'd be much more sort of personal. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Wow.
Somebody write that, would you?
Yeah. So the next question, if the Christmas story had happened today, how do you think it would play out? And so this question had me like going through so many different scenarios. And I don't think it happens at Flower Mound Presbyterian Hospital.
Nope.
By somebody who walks in easily. They've already paid for the birth in full, and they're ready to go, and it's going to be a safe experience. But
A good OBGYN.
they've had their prenatal visits and all that. So I think it happens with somebody on the margins of society, somebody, right after the birth, soon after Herod issues a decree to kill all the babies.
Mm-hmm.
So that somebody that's wrestling with the government, somebody who's fearing for their life, somebody who doesn't have wealth and privilege, and so I wonder, is it a Congolese woman who's at a refugee camp in Tanzania looking for a safe spot, and then all of a sudden the refugee camp becomes unsafe there, and so now they've got to flee and find another temporary space? Does it happen in the caravan trying to flee from El Salvador? I don't know, but it's scary to think about. Where would a vulnerable Christ child be born today? And it's probably not at a place that I'm walking on a normal basis.
I was just going to say, the video we shared this morning, right?
Yeah.
Just unexpected, completely unexpected, not typical, not normal.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's wild stuff.
Well, and then, you think about, I was sharing earlier before we went live that I put all my Christmas out just yesterday, a little bit late, and it was such a wonderful time to do it. And as I spent the day doing that, I was thinking about, you know, what this was leading to, you know, leading to Christ's birth. And then I started thinking about us talking the first time we met about the second coming of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, you know, gosh, what if we miss it? You know, what if because we think we know what it's going to be, just like with the baby Jesus, they thought they knew how Jesus was going to be born and where and what it was going to look like. It was going to be a king, it was going to be an army, it was going to be all these things. What if we miss it, you know? And I was just sort of wrapped up in all of that as I was doing that. And then when I read this question this morning, I was like, wow, it brought me back to that point.
Yeah, it says, how do you think it would play out? I think that just as Mary and Joseph were surprised, they were willing.
Yeah.
And they were, it says that Joseph was a very faithful man, was a God-fearing man. So I would think that if it happened today, that we might be surprised, but we would not be surprised that it would be a mother and a father who were willing and were faithful and confused and frightened and all those things, but willing and available. And so my prayer is that, you know, that we would all this season make ourselves willing and available for whatever surprise God has for us.
Yeah.
Right.
We have another question from Chris. He says, Mary's pregnancy would have been considered scandalous, but she was shown mercy. Why do you think as Christians we are so quick to judge what we consider to be scandalous today?
That's a great question.
Sin. Our sinful nature, right? We love to cast judgment, right? We love to point fingers. I do think it may not be as scandalous today, but I think it would still be scandalous, right? I mean, Mary is likely somewhere between 12 and 15 years old. She's not married. I still think that would be scandalous.
Sure,
You know,
absolutely.
both of our kids were adopted, and both of them were born to moms who were 15 years old. And while that was not scandalous to us, we recognize the difficulty of that and how hard that would have been for those birth moms. And luckily for them, it wasn't scandalous per se, but it was hard and it was strenuous on family and all of that stuff. So.
Well, and I mean, it would be hard for us to believe in, you know, a virgin birth, right? It would be really hard.
Sure, we'd be,
Or DNA tests, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
like,
Exactly.
Yes,
Right.
That would be something to
Right.
test Jesus.
Right.
Yes.
Good thing you wasn't born today, right?
Yeah.
but that's a reminder too, right? To all those people that I'm sure it was both scandalous to some and Mary was shunned. And I would hope that there were some other people that offered her grace
Absolutely.
in the midst of it. And I think that's the challenge for us, right?
Mhm.
Who is holy in our midst that other people have pushed aside? And we could say, we might not understand this whole thing,
Right.
but I'm here and you're here, and I'm going to love you and I'm going to care for you. What do you need?
Right.
How can I be there with you?
And that sounds like a value we have called
Radical
love.
love, right? Yeah.
That's true.
How
Right.
cool is that?
Yeah.
How
Mhm.
cool is that? That's a great question. Well, I think we've come to the end of our questions. Are there any other online questions?
Nope.
Well, so we want to say thanks for joining us. It's been fun.
Yeah.
It's been fun every week, right?
Yeah.
To get to know you guys better, to get to answer questions and to spend time together. We're always grateful for y'all to submit questions. Today was real fun, right? We had a lot of live questions, so thanks for submitting those. If we didn't get to your questions this week, know that we will try to get to them next week. We sure want to encourage you to submit other questions this coming week too, and join us next week for our last session online, 7 p.m. next Sunday. We'd sure love to have you. I also want to remind you that we have Christmas Eve worship services December the 24th. You can get all of that information about the dates, the times, and the styles of the services at tmumc.org/Christmas, and you'll get a great information at that place. So we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks for joining us, y'all.